It's Thursday, October 10th, 2024, and we are 25 days away from the election. Welcome to today's Make It Make Sense mini-episode. I'm Grant Herms. Today on the show, Hurricane Milton makes landfall in Florida, wreaking havoc as the country continues to grapple with rescues from Helene and a torrent of misinformation so bad that the president had to get involved. But let's start with Milton. Hurricane Milton hit the Gulf Coast of Florida Wednesday night, actually hours earlier than expected. But before that, as the then Category 5 hurricane was making its way toward the coast, there was so much power and energy in the storm that it produced more than 100 tornadoes in Florida. In Florida, where tornadoes don't happen. Nothing about Florida is built for tornadoes. Those twisters killed 4 people on the eastern side of the state. Then the storm did hit, and it actually mercifully lost some steam, but still made landfall as a Cat 3, bringing with it wind speeds of about 120 miles an hour. And while there were storm surges predicted to be more than 15 feet, the flooding, while extremely widespread, was a little less than expected. Still feet deep of water, and it's still an unbelievable disaster, but just not as deep as the initial warnings. The storm knocked out power to more than 1 million people, or roughly 1/3 of the state, mostly in a line from Tampa and Sarasota on the central Gulf Coast of Florida to Jacksonville on the northeast corner of the state. It knocked down trees, it sent a crane into a building in St. Petersburg, and tore the roof off Tropicana Stadium where the Tampa Bay Rays play. The floodwaters also decimated the infrastructure, leaving residents who had power and running water in the state having to boil their water or look for safe drinking water in other ways. In one town, 2 million gallons of raw sewage spilled into the streets from a flooded wastewater treatment plant, making the rescue efforts not just a disaster zone, but also a hazmat scene as well. So far across the state, hundreds of people have been rescued and more are still trying to flee their homes, but many have run into a problem because gas stations have started to run out of gas and fuel. According to Gas Buddy, which tracks fuel supply and prices, 2/3 of Florida gas stations are either out of commission or have run dry. Now, FEMA is already on the ground, and there's been reporting that Governor Ron DeSantis and President Joe Biden have already spoken over the phone. At this time, DeSantis did thank Biden for all the federal help. He's been dodging White House calls and meetings after Helene and then before Milton. Now, in all, Milton has killed 9 people, including those 4 who were killed by the tornadoes, and rescuers are afraid that number is only going to rise, with more than 11 million people still in danger of flash flooding as I'm recording this. Now that brings us to the next bit here. In the hours before the hurricane hit, Biden held a virtual press conference where he talked about the federal prep already underway and urged people to listen to DeSantis and disaster officials and evacuate their homes if they could. He also had to take time out of his update, in which the lives of thousands were hanging in the balance, to talk about the nonsense that's still coming from right-wing nuts like Representative from Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has continued to say that the government can not only control the weather, but can create a hurricane and then direct it towards Republican populations. He also talked a lot about the other lies that have been spreading in the states hit hardest by Helene. And if you want to know more about those, go back and listen to Tuesday's mini. Frankly, it just bummed me out a bit, so I'm not going to go back through all of those. We also just don't have the time. This would not be a mini anymore. But here's what Biden had to say.
Over the last few weeks, there's been a reckless and irresponsible and relentless promotion of disinformation and outright lies about what's going on. It's undermining confidence in the people in Florida and incredible rescue and recovery work that has been undertaken. Literally, there are thousands of fellow Americans who are putting their lives at stake and putting on the line to do the dangerous work that needs to be done now. And it's harmful to those who most need the help. Quite frankly, these lies are un-American, and there is simply no place for them. Not now, not ever. Former President Trump has led this onslaught of lies. Assertions have been made that property is being confiscated. That's simply not true. They're saying people impacted by these storms will receive $750 in cash and no more. That is simply not true either. They're saying that money needed for these crises are being diverted to migrants. What the heck are they talking about? Stop it. It's outrageous. It's just not true. Now the claims are getting even more bizarre. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Georgia, is now saying the federal government is literally controlling the weather. We're controlling the weather. It's beyond ridiculous. It's so stupid. It's got to stop.
So stupid is right. And I think Marjorie Taylor Greene knows that. But let's talk about what she's claiming here, because like all good lies, there is a nugget of truth in the middle that makes the rest of the lie seem believable. Greene has been putting up things like this, saying, yes, they control the weather. Now, naturally, a lot of people were asking who they are because Greene has a history of making anti-Semitic remarks, including saying space lasers controlled by Jews caused wildfires in California. Greene then posted another thing online saying that she was talking about NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. That's the administration that studies the weather, along with the National Weather Service and NASA. Now, Greene then posted several screenshots from NOAA's website talking about weather modification. Those are real screenshots, but because Greene is purposefully being stupid here, she didn't go any further than that. So let's talk about weather modification for just a second here. Weather modification is attempting to change the weather through human processes. It has a lot of different meanings and a lot of different experiments that can happen, but specifically what Greene is talking about is cloud seeding. And that's been around since the 1940s, since scientists started wondering how clouds were made, and if we could figure that out, then maybe we could jumpstart the process of making clouds and rain to end things like droughts. And that's how we get to cloud seeding. It's a process of spraying tiny particles into the air to freeze water in the air to create clouds and then hopefully make rain or snow. That process, however, is wildly unreliable and only really producing any kind of changes when the conditions are just right. There have to be clouds, which aren't always there. There need to be the right conditions for the energy to produce clouds and weather patterns, which you don't always have. There also needs to be the right kind of weather pattern, which isn't always the case. And even then, it might not work. And we are talking about minuscule results when it does. It wasn't until 2018 that scientists were able to even measure if it worked at all. And a recent study of more than 60 years of cloud seeding from the climate nonprofit, the Desert Research Institute in Nevada, found that cloud seeding only produced 10% more precipitation if it works at all. So nothing remotely close to a hurricane, but if that's not enough, humans don't have a way to create or sustain a hurricane, let alone direct it. According to the National Hurricane Center, a fully formed hurricane has the same amount of energy as a 10 megaton nuclear bomb going off every 20 minutes. To put that in perspective, that would be equal to setting off 667 Hiroshimas every 20 minutes. In just an hour of a full hurricane, these things last days. It's more than the largest nuclear bomb ever exploded in human history, which was the Tsar bomb in Russia. And we are talking just a fully formed hurricane, not even the size of Helene or Milton. And if the U.S. were to have the capability to create and control that kind of power, not once but twice, it would dwarf the power of every nuclear weapon on Earth right now combined. And to have the ability to do that without raising some kind of attention is just impossible. So, is Marjorie Taylor Greene right when she says the government knows the weather can be manipulated? Sure. Only in perfect conditions, and only sometimes. And we certainly cannot create or control a hurricane. And the thing to me about this is more than just dunking on Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's that what she's saying and what thousands of others are saying by spreading this conspiracy, that the Biden administration, which is hundreds of people, the U.S. government, which is thousands of people, Democrats, which are tens of millions of people, are the kind of people who would spin up a hurricane to kill hundreds of Americans, endanger millions of others, cause tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars in damage, and cause untold suffering. just for personal gain or the outright cruelty of it. That's the kind of language that gets people hurt. That's the kind of fuel that people looking for an excuse to engage in political violence are looking for. If the other side are evil sorcerers who control the weather to watch people suffer, then what happens to them doesn't matter. Which is why when these things pop up, it's worth debunking them. And I know it sucks because it's depressing as hell, but I'd argue that the alternative is worse. Okay. I know another bummer of an episode this week. I'm really trying to not make these a bummer, but the topic is what it is. Mercifully, I think that is it for today's MIMS Mini. Thank you so much for listening. If you stuck all the way through this one, please rate and review the show on whatever podcast app you're listening to this on. Like and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications on YouTube. You can also subscribe to the Make It Make Sense Substack, where I've got bonus content up there. And as always, share the show on social media. It's MIMS News Pod. That's MIMS News Pod. All one word on every platform. I am at Grant Herms on X and at Grant Herms TV on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Herms, and I'll talk to you in tomorrow's full episode.